Vote for me, Karen concluded, and I guarantee that within 6 months, Willowbrook Estates will have the highest property values in the county. We'll be the neighborhood other neighborhoods aspire to become. The election wasn't even close. Karen won with 73% of the vote, carrying every demographic except dog owners, who were apparently concerned about her proposed pet waste response protocol. Karen's first board meeting as president was a masterclass in efficient governance. She prepared a 47-point agenda, and she intended to address every item. First order of business, she announced, establishing the Compliance Task Force. Board member Janet Walsh looked confused. What does that involve? Mandatory inspections. Every property. Every month. Karen distributed thick binders to each member. I've developed a comprehensive scoring system. Any property scoring below 85% will receive an official notice of deficiency. Karen, said longtime member Bob Chen, this seems excessive. People moved here for community, not whatever this is. This, Karen replied, her eyes gleaming, is excellence. And excellence requires standards. Within her first month, Karen had issued 127 violation notices. She'd hired a part-time inspector, her nephew Derek, who needed a job anyway. She'd instituted weekly beautification drives, where volunteers would document potential violations. She'd even convinced the board to approve funding for a neighborhood app where residents could report violations in real time. The results were immediate and dramatic. Lawns became impossibly green. Paint jobs appeared overnight. Property values did indeed rise, just as Karen had predicted. But something else was rising too. Tension. The Henderson family received a notice because their garden hose was visible from the street. The Patels got cited for unauthorized seasonal decorations. Halloween pumpkins in November. Even the community's beloved crossing guard, Mrs. Chen, received a violation for parking her car 6 inches too close to her driveway. By December, Karen stood in her kitchen reviewing the month's violation reports, feeling a satisfaction she'd never experienced. Order was beautiful. Control was intoxicating. She had no idea that 3 blocks away, a group of her neighbors was holding their own meeting, and the word recall was being mentioned with increasing frequency. The recall petition appeared overnight like a plague, taped to lampposts and mailboxes throughout Willowbrook Estates. Stop the tyranny, it screamed in bold red letters, followed by a list of Karen's crimes against community spirit. By 9 a.m., Karen had collected 17 copies, each one making her blood pressure spike higher. Who organized this? She demanded during the emergency board meeting she'd called. The other members avoided eye contact. Even Derek, her nephew, was looking uncomfortable in his inspector's chair. Karen, Janet Walsh said carefully, maybe we should consider scaling back some of the enforcement. Scaling back? Karen's voice could have cracked concrete. Janet, we've increased property values by 12% in 6 months. 12%, and you want to scale back? Bob Chen cleared his throat. People are unhappy, Karen. Mrs. Patterson cried during her hearing about the unapproved birdbath. Actually cried. Tears don't increase property values, Bob. Compliance does. But even as Karen spoke, she could feel something shifting. The recall petition had garnered 847 signatures. Ironically, the exact number of violations she'd originally documented to launch her campaign. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. The recall hearing was scheduled for a Saturday morning in the community center. Karen arrived 2 hours early, her presentation materials precisely organized, her counterattack strategy refined to perfection. She prepared a 73-slide presentation demonstrating the neighborhood's improvement under her leadership. The room filled beyond capacity. Gerald Morrison, looking smug for the first time in months, sat in the front row next to a woman Karen didn't recognize, someone with a briefcase and the unmistakable aura of a lawyer. Before we begin, the lawyer announced, standing up, I'm Rebecca Santos, representing several homeowners in a class action lawsuit against the HOA for harassment and selective enforcement. Karen felt her world tilt. Selective enforcement. I enforce every rule equally. Ms. Whitmore, Rebecca continued, did you cite yourself for the unauthorized security cameras you installed to monitor your neighbors? Or the non-regulation LED floodlights you use for your own property inspections? The room went dead silent. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. In her zeal for perfect enforcement, she'd somehow become the very thing she'd been fighting against, a violator. Furthermore, Rebecca continued, we have evidence that you've been using the HOA's funds to pay for personal legal research and surveillance equipment. Karen watched her empire crumble in real time. Board members were whispering among themselves. Residents were pulling out their phones to document this moment. Even Derek was slowly removing his inspector's badge. But then something unexpected happened. Karen started laughing. Not the maniacal laugh of a defeated tyrant, but something genuine and almost relieved. You know what? She said, her voice carrying clearly through the room. You're absolutely right. I became exactly what I was fighting against. She looked around the room at faces that had been fearful, angry, resentful. I thought perfect order would make us all happy, but I turned us into enemies instead. The recall vote was unanimous, but as Karen packed up her materials, something strange happened. Mrs. Patterson approached her first, then the Hendersons, then even the Pattles. Karen, Mrs. Patterson said quietly, you were wrong about a lot of things, but you weren't wrong about everything. My property value really did go up. As Karen walked home through the neighborhood she tried to perfect, she noticed something she'd missed in all her months of enforcement. People were actually talking to each other. The crisis had brought the community together in a way her rules never could have. From her kitchen window that night, Karen watched the neighbors she'd spent months citing as they gathered in the Hendersons' backyard for an impromptu barbecue. She wasn't invited, but oddly, that was okay. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news about Willowbrook. Our HOA could use someone with your particular skills. Interested in a fresh start. Karen stared at the message, then looked out at her perfectly maintained but completely empty front yard. Change was coming, but this time, maybe she could be the right kind of force for it. She started typing her response, a small smile playing at her lips. After all, some people never learn. And maybe that wasn't always a bad thing. Karen Whitmore stood in her perfectly manicured front yard at 6:47 am, wielding a measuring tape like a sword, when she discovered that her neighbor's mailbox was exactly 3 inches closer to the sidewalk than regulation allowed. 3 inches, she shrieked, her voice carrying across Willowbrook Estates like an air raid siren, causing Mrs. Henderson to spill coffee all over her prized begonias. But that wasn't the shocking part. The shocking part was what happened next. She marched directly to the HOA office, burst through the doors without knocking, and announced to Board President Gerald Morrison, I'm running for your job, and I'm going to win by the biggest landslide this neighborhood has ever seen. Gerald nearly choked on his breakfast burrito, but Karen wasn't finished. She slammed a folder thick as a phone book onto his desk. I've documented 847 violations in the past 6 months. Your administration has been criminally negligent. The third shocking moment came when Gerald opened the folder. Every single violation was meticulously documented with photographs, timestamps, and cross-referenced HOA regulation numbers. Karen had even included aerial drone footage, which was itself an HOA violation, but somehow she'd gotten permission from the city. Gerald's face went white as he flipped through page after page of homeowners' transgressions that the current board had completely missed. You've lost control of this neighborhood, Gerald, Karen continued, her voice deadly calm now. Last month, the Johnsons painted their shutters forest plen instead of the approved forest mist. The Pattles have a garden gnome that exceeds the maximum allowable wind sea level by at least 40%. And don't even get me started on the unauthorized bird feeder at 1247 Maple Lane. Gerald tried to regain his composure. Now, Karen, I'm sure we can work together. Together? Karen's laugh could have stripped paint. Gerald, you let someone install a decorative windmill, a windmill, in a community that specifically prohibits rustic lawn ornaments under Section 12.47. You're done. That afternoon, Karen systematically visited every house in the neighborhood, her campaign speech refined to surgical precision. She didn't just promise change, she promised order. Vote for me, she told the Hendersons, and I'll make sure your property values don't plummet because someone decided their fence could be eggshell white instead of pure white. By evening, her phone was ringing nonstop. Half the calls were from supporters who were tired of the board's lax enforcement. The other half were from terrified homeowners who'd suddenly realized their own potential violations. Karen meticulously noted every caller's concerns, building her intelligence network. As she sat in her spotless kitchen that night, reviewing her notes under the harsh LED lighting she'd calculated for maximum productivity, Karen felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. She'd found her calling, and it was going to reshape Willowbrook Estates forever. The campaign was just beginning, but Karen could already taste victory. What she couldn't yet see was that her quest for perfect order was about to unleash perfect chaos. Karen's campaign machine moved with military efficiency. Within 2 weeks, she'd installed a command center in her converted garage, complete with laminated neighborhood maps, color-coded violation charts, and a database that would make the NSA proud. Her campaign slogan, "Order through enforcement," appeared on professionally printed yard signs that were placed with mathematical precision exactly 18 inches from sidewalks throughout the neighborhood. "I've called this emergency town hall," Karen announced from behind a podium she'd rented specifically for the occasion, "because the current board has failed you all catastrophically." The community center was packed, standing room only. Karen had personally called every resident twice. She clicked her laser pointer at a projected photograph. "This is 1156 Oak Drive. Notice anything wrong?" The crowd murmured uncertainly. "The mailbox post is cedar, not the regulation pressure-treated pine. This violation has been visible for 8 months without intervention." Gerald Morrison raised his hand from the back. "Karen, that seems like a minor. M-I-N-O-R." Karen's voice boomed through her wireless microphone. "Property values are built on consistency, Gerald. 1 cedar post becomes 2, 2 become 4, and suddenly we're living in a lawless wasteland where people think they can install whatever they want." The crowd was split. Half were nodding vigorously. These were the residents who'd been quietly frustrated with their neighbors' various infractions. The other half looked increasingly uncomfortable as Karen continued her slideshow of violations, each more seemingly trivial than the last.